Okay. Hello, everybody. We are doing something a little different today. I am going to be reading you guys The Lightning Thief, one of my favorite books, well, my favorite series. It's Percy Jackson, and I wanted to reread them, and I started reading. I'm like, hey, why not do this on stream like everything else? So, I'm also going to be making a video, so you might have brief moments of me just kind of pausing and talking and stuff. So this is not drawing, this is purely just listening. I might check the chat occasionally. It's gonna be interesting, this is a test, so, here we go. I'm gonna be reading it to you, so if you've already read the book, good for you. You'll join me on rereading this masterpiece. If you've never read the book before, I'm gonna read you a little bit of the book, see if you like it, and if you do, go get it from the library and read it yourself. It's an amazing series. So, yeah. So I've got my stream, I've got my book, my Snickers, my water. I'm all ready to go. Okay. Just let me get set up here. As I said, I am recording an interesting, I don't know if you'd call it a vlog, like a reading vlog, or like something. Also, whoever just commented a few seconds ago, well, at this point it's a few minutes, I don't know. Oh, hi, Westy. I didn't even notice you yet. You can read it with me. I'll have to invite you to one of these reading streams, maybe. Right? I don't know how to do, like, voice with other people on stream, though. As proven evident by or 2 nights ago. Ooh, you should start the Mellow Mushroom. It's like, okay, it's definitely one of my favorite, is anything by Rick Riordan. He's great. So, yeah. I'm gonna get started once I set up my time lapse. Okay. Are you guys prepared? Because I am. Okay. Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great, read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, if you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us. And once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too. And they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it, but things really started going bad last May when our 6th grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 mental case kids and 2 teachers on a yellow school bus heading to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most Yancey field trips were. But Mr. Brunner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Brunner was this middle-aged guy in a motorized wheelchair. He had thinning hair and a scruffy beard and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and jokes and let us play games in class. He also had this awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons, so he was the only teacher whose class didn't put me to sleep. I hoped this trip would be okay. At least I hoped that for once I wouldn't get in trouble. Boy, was I wrong. See, bad things happen to me on field trips. Like at my 5th grade school, when we went to the Saratoga battlefield. I had this accident with a Revolutionary War cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course, I got expelled anyway. And before that, at my 4th grade school, when we took a behind-the-scenes tour of the Marine World Shark Pool, I sorta hit the wrong lever on the catwalk, and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, well, you guys get the idea. This trip was I was determined to be good. All the way into the city, I put up with Nancy Bobofit, the freckly, red-headed kleptomaniac girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. Grover was an easy target. He was scrawny, he cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades, because he was the only 6th grader with acne and the start of wispy beard on his chin. On top of all that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of his life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him. But don't let that fool you. You should have seen him run when it was enchilada day at the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Bobofet was throwing wads of sandwich that stuck in his curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything embarrassing or mildly entertaining happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay, I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of Nancy's lunch. That's it. I started to get up, but Grover pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You know who will get blamed if anything happens. Looking back on it, I wish I'd decked Nancy Bobofet right then and there. In-school suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself in. Mr. Brunner led the museum tour. He rode up front in his wheelchair, guiding us through the big, echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of really old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff survived for 3,000 years. He gathered us around a 13-foot-tall stone column. I can't read. Why am I reading? Stone column with a big sphinx on top, and started telling us about how it was a grave marker. A stele for a girl about our age. Is that stele? I don't know how to pronounce that. Just like an FYI, I can't pronounce things at all. I can't English, and I definitely can't Greek. So all those Greek words in this book, like, give me a little bit of, I don't know, little leeway. He told us about the carvings on the sides. I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting, but everyone around me was talking. And every time I told them to shut up, the other teacher chaperone, Miss Dodds, would give me the evil eye. Miss Dodds was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Yancey halfway through the year, when our last math teacher had a nervous breakdown. From her first day, Miss Dodds loved Nancy Bobofet. I figured I was the devil spawn. She would point her crooked finger at me and say, "Now, honey," real sweet, and I knew I was going to get after-school detention for a month. One time after she made me erase answers out of old math workbooks until midnight, I told Grover I didn't think Miss Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You're absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Bobofet snickered something about the naked guy on the stele, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant it to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Brunner stopped his story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "did you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Brunner pointed to one of the pictures on the stele. Perhaps you'll tell us what this picture represents." I looked at the carving and felt a flush of relief, because I actually recognized it. "That's Kronos eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. "Kronos was, and he did that because, well," I racked my brain to remember. "Kronos was the king god, and..." "God?" Mr. Brunner asked. "Titan," I corrected myself. "And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods, so, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And later when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad, Kronos, into barfing up his brothers and sisters." "Ew," said one of the girls behind me. "And so there was a big fight between the gods and the Titans," I continued, "and the gods won." Some snickers from the group. Behind me, Nancy Beaufort mumbled to a friend, "Like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job applications, 'Please explain why Kronos ate his kids.'" And why, Mr. Jackson," Brunner said, to paraphrase Miss Beaufort's excellent question, "does this matter in real life?" "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up," Nancy hissed, her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got packed too. Mr. Brunner was the only one who ever caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about his question and shrugged. "I don't know, sir." "I see." Mr. Brunner looked disappointed. "Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge all his other 5 children, who of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him into pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Miss Dodds, would you lead us back outside?" The class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, "Mr. Jackson?" I knew this was coming. I told Grover to keep going, then I turned toward Mr. Brunner. "Sir?" Mr. Brunner had this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old, and had seen everything. "You must learn the answer to my question," Mr. Brunner told me. "About the Titans?" "About real life, and how your studies apply to it." "Oh. What you learn from me," he said, "is vitally important. I expect you to treat it as such. I will accept only the best from you, Percy Jackson." I wanted to get angry. This guy pushed me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, "What ho!" and challenged us, sword point against chalk, to run to the board and name every Greek and Roman person who'd ever lived, and their mother, and what god they'd worshipped. But Mr. Brunner expected me to be as good as everybody else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention deficit disorder. And I had never made up above C- in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. And I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. I mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Brunner took one long, sad look at the steel, like he'd been at the girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. The class gathered on the front steps of the museum, where we could watch the foot traffic along Fifth Avenue. Overhead, a huge storm was brewing, with clouds blacker than I'd ever seen over the city. I figured maybe it was global warming or something, because the weather all across New York State had been weird since Christmas. We'd had massive snowstorms, flooding, wildfires from lightning strikes. I wouldn't have been surprised if this was a hurricane blowing in. Nobody else seemed to notice. Some of the guys were pelting pigeons with Lunchable crackers. Nancy Beaufort was trying to pickpocket something from a lady's purse. And of course, Miss Dodds wasn't seeing a thing. Grover and I sat at the edge of the fountain, away from the others. We thought that maybe if we did that, everybody wouldn't know we're from that school. The school for the loser freaks who couldn't make it elsewhere. Detention? Grover asked. Nah, I said. Not from Brunner. I just wish he'd lay off me sometimes. I mean, I'm not a genius. Grover didn't say anything for a while. Then, when I thought he was going to give me some deep, philosophical comment to make me feel better, he said, "Can I have your apple?" I didn't have much of an appetite, so I let him take it. I watched the stream of cabs going down Fifth Avenue, and thought about my mom's apartment, only a little ways uptown from where we sat. I hadn't seen her since Christmas. I wanted so bad to jump in a taxi and head home. She'd hug me and be glad to see me, but she'd be disappointed too. She'd send me right back to Yancey. Remind me that I had to try harder, even if it was my sixth school in 6 years. I was probably going to be kicked out again. I wouldn't be able to stand that sad look she'd give me. Mr. Brunner parked his wheelchair at the base of the handicapped ramp. He ate celery while he read a paperback novel. A red umbrella stuck up from the back of his chair, making it look like a motorized cafe table. I was about to unwrap my sandwich when Nancy Bobofit appeared in front of me with her ugly friends. I guess she'd gotten tired of stealing from the tourists and dumped her half-eaten lunch in Grover's lap. Oops, she grinned at me, with her crooked teeth. Her freckles were orange, as if somebody had spray-painted her face with liquid Cheetos. I tried to stay cool. The school counselor told me 1,000,000 times, "Count to 10, gain control of your temper." But I was so mad my mind went blank. A wave roared in my ears. I don't remember touching her, but the next thing I knew, Nancy was sitting on her butt in the fountain, screaming, "Percy pushed me!" Miss Dodds materialized next to us. Some of the kids were whispering, "Did you see the water? Like, it grabbed her." I didn't know what they were talking about. All I knew was that I was in trouble again. As soon as Miss Dodds was sure poor little Nancy was okay, promising to get her a new shirt at the museum gift shop, etc., etc., Miss Dodds turned on me. There was a triumphant fire in her eyes, as if I'd done something she'd been waiting for all semester. "Now, honey." "I know," I grumbled. "A month erasing workbooks." That wasn't the right thing to say. "Come with me," Miss Dodds said. "Wait," Grover yelped. "It was me. I pushed her." I stared at him stunned. I couldn't believe he was trying to cover for me. Miss Dodds scared Grover to death. She glared at him so hard, his whiskery chin trembled. "I don't think so, Mr. Underwood," she said. "But you will stay here." Grover looked at me desperately. "It's okay, man," I told him. "Thanks for trying." "Honey," Miss Dodds barked at me. "Now." Nancy Bobofit smirked. I gave her my deluxe "I'll kill you later" stare. Then I turned to face Miss Dodds, but she wasn't there. She was standing at the museum entrance, way at the top of the steps, gesturing impatiently at me to come on. How'd she get there so fast? I have moments like that, when my brain falls asleep or something, and the next thing I know I've missed something, as if a puzzle piece fell out of the universe and left me staring at the blank place behind it. The school counselor told me this was part of the ADHD. My brain misinterpreting things. I wasn't so sure. I went after Miss Dodds. Halfway up the steps, I glanced back at Grover. He was looking pale, cutting his eyes between me and Mr. Brunner, like he wanted Mr. Brunner to notice what was going on. But Mr. Brunner was absorbed in his novel. I looked back up. Miss Dodds had disappeared again. She was now inside the building at the end of the entrance hall. Okay, I thought. She's going to make me buy a new shirt for Nancy at the gift shop. But apparently that wasn't the plan. I followed her deeper into the museum. When I'd finally caught up with her, we were back in the Greek and Roman section. Except for us, the gallery was empty. Miss Dodds stood with her arms crossed in front of a big marble frieze of the Greek gods. She was making this weird noise in her throat, like growling. Even without the noise, I would have been nervous. It's weird being alone with a teacher, especially Miss Dodds. Something about the way she looked at the friezes, as if she wanted to pulverize it. Oh gosh, my speaking. I need another drink of water. You've been giving us problems, honey, she said. I did the safe thing. I said, "Yes, ma'am." She tugged on the cuffs of her leather jacket. Did you really think you would get away with it? The look in her eyes was beyond mad. It was evil. She's a teacher, I thought nervously. It's not like she's going to hurt me. I said, I'll try harder, ma'am. Thunder shook the building. We are not fools, Percy Jackson, Miss Dodd said. It was only a matter of time before we found you out. Confess, and you'll suffer less pain. I didn't know what she was talking about. All I could think of was that the teachers must have found the illegal stash of candy I'd been selling out of my dorm room, or maybe they'd realized I got my essay on Tom Sawyer from the internet without ever reading the book, and now they were going to take away my grade. Or worse, they were going to make me read the book. Well, she demanded. Ma'am, Your time is up, she hissed. Then the weirdest thing happened. Her eyes began to glow like barbecue coals. Her fingers stretched, turning into talons. Her jacket melted into large, leathery wings. She wasn't human. She was a shriveled-up hag with bat wings and claws and a mouth full of yellow fangs, and she was about to slice me to ribbons. Then things got even stranger. Mr. Brunner, who'd been out in front of the museum a minute before, wheeled his chair into the doorway of the gallery, holding a pen in his hand. "What ho, Percy!" he shouted, and tossed the pen through the air. Miss Dodds lunged at me. With a yelp, I dodged and felt talons slash the air next to my ear. I snatched the ballpoint pen out of the air, but when it hit my hand, it wasn't a pen anymore. It was a sword. Mr. Brunner's bronze sword, which he always used on tournament day. Mrs. Dodds spun towards me with a murderous look in her eyes. My knees were jelly. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the sword. She snarled, "Die, honey!" and she flew straight at me. Absolute terror ran through my body. I did the only thing that came naturally. I swung the sword. The metal blade hit her shoulder and passed clean through her body, as if it were made of water. Hiss! Miss Dodds was a sandcastle in a power fan. She exploded into yellow powder, vaporized on the spot, leaving nothing but the smell of sulfur and dying screech and a chill of evil in the air, as if those two glowing red eyes were still watching me. I was alone. There was a ballpoint pen in my hands. Mr. Brunner wasn't there. Nobody was there but me. My hands were still trembling. My lunch must have been contaminated with magic mushrooms or something. Had I imagined the whole thing? I went back outside. It had started to rain. Grover was sitting by the fountain, a museum map tented over his head. Nancy Bobofit was still standing there, soaked from her swim in the fountain, grumbling to her ugly friends. When she saw me, she said, "I hope Miss Kerr whipped your butt." I said, "Who?" "Our teacher? Duh." I blinked. We had no teacher named Mrs. Kerr. We had no teacher named Mrs. Kerr. I asked Nancy what she was talking about. She just rolled her eyes and turned away. I asked Grover where Miss Dodds was. He said, "Who?" But he paused first, and he wouldn't look at me. So I thought he was messing with me. "Not funny, man," I told him. "This is serious." Thunder boomed overhead. I saw Mr. Brunner sitting under his red umbrella reading his book as if he'd never moved. I went over to him. He looked up a little distracted. "Ah, that would be my pen. Please bring your own writing utensil in the future, Mr. Jackson." I handed Mr. Brunner his pen. I hadn't even realized I was still holding it. "Sir," I said, "where's Mrs. Dodds?" He stared at me blankly. "Who?" "The other chaperone, Mrs. Dodds, the pre-algebra teacher." He frowned and sat forward, looking mildly concerned. "Percy, there is no Mrs. Dodds on this trip. As far as I know, there's never been a Mrs. Dodds at Yancey Academy. Are you feeling all right?" And that is the end of chapter 1. So I'm going to take a little pause here just to kind of interact with you guys a bit, because I have not really been looking at the chat at all. How many of you guys have actually read the book, and how many of you is this your first time, like, hearing of it, or, like, even hearing part of the book? Like, you might have heard of the book before, but, like, have you ever read a section of it or listened to a section of it? I am going to eat my Snickers while chatting with you guys. What do you think, for those of you who haven't read the book, what do you think's up with this disappearing teacher, Mrs. Dodds, and what she turned into, and what does Mr. Brunner and Grover know about this? Man, there's a lot of people it's their first time. So, for those of you who have it as their first time, do you really enjoy the book so far? I mean, I know we're only one chapter in, but this is one of my favorite books of all time, so I don't know, I just want to know what you guys think. Yeah, the movie is nothing like the books. I will let you know that. The books are way better. Isn't Grover a furry? I mean, I guess. So lots of people enjoying it. Would you like me to read the whole book with you on stream? Obviously not in this one sitting, but like over the next how long? Like if I read every chapter on stream, like maybe 2 or 3 chapters a stream, till we got through the whole book, would you like that? Because I think it's kind of neat. Cool. Sorry, I'm just enjoying my Snickers right now. It's really good. I don't know if I'm going to delete this stream after it's done or not, because I don't want to upload, like, the audiobook. Like, I don't want to upload the whole book onto the internet. That is pirating, I think, and that's probably not good. But I will be reading it on stream. Whether I delete it or not later is to be determined. I have a Camp Half-Blood shirt. That's how much I love this series. I dressed up as Annabeth one year for Halloween. My day has been okay. Okay, I finished the Snickers. So yeah, the movie had a lot of problems, but they're working on a TV show now, and the author is involved, and they're gonna have age-appropriate characters. I'm hyped. That's partially why I'm reading this book right now. I want to reread the whole series, even though the show won't come out for another few years. I'm just super exciting. Okay, who's ready to start chapter 2? My voice is fine, thanks for asking. Okay, I'm going to start chapter 2 right now. Chapter 2 is called 3 Old Ladies Knit the Socks of Death. I wonder what's gonna happen. I was used to the occasional weird experience, but usually they were over quickly. This 24/7 hallucination was more than I could handle. For the rest of the school year, my entire campus seemed to be playing some kind of trick on me. The students acted as if they were completely and totally convinced that Miss Kerr, a perky blonde woman who I'd never seen in my life until she got up on our bus at the end of the field trip, had been our pre-algebra teacher since Christmas. Every so often I'd spring a Mrs. Dodds reference on somebody just to see if I could trip them up, but they'd stare at me like I was a psycho. It got so bad I almost believed them. Mrs. Dodds had never existed. Almost. But Grover couldn't fool me. When I mentioned the name Dodds to him, he would hesitate, then claim she didn't exist. But I knew he was lying. Something was going on. Something had happened at the museum. I didn't have much time to think about it during the days, but at night, visions of Miss Dodds with talons and leathery wings would wake me up in a cold sweat. The freak weather continued, which didn't help my mood. One night, a thunderstorm blew out the windows in my dorm room. A few days later, the biggest tornado ever spotted in the Hudson Valley touched down 50 miles from Yancey Academy. One of the current events we studied in social studies class was the unusual number of small planes that had gone down in sudden squalls in the Atlantic that year. I started feeling cranky and irritable most of the time. My grades slipped from D's to F's. I got into more fights with Nancy Bobofit and her friends. I was sent out into the hallway in almost every class. Finally, when our English teacher, Mr. Nicole, asked me for the millionth time why I was too lazy to study for spelling tests, I snapped. I called him an old sot. I wasn't even sure what it meant, but it sounded good. The headmaster sent my mom a letter the following week, making it official. I would not be invited back next year to Yancey Academy. Fine, I told myself. Just fine. There we go, sorry. Fine. I was homesick. I wanted to be with my mom in our little apartment on the Upper East Side, even if I had to go to public school, and put up with my obnoxious stepfather and his stupid poker parties. And yet, there were things I'd miss at Yancey. The view of the woods out my dorm window, the Hudson River in the distance, the smell of pine trees. I'd miss Grover, who'd been a good friend, even if he was a little strange. I worried how he'd survive next year without me. I'd miss Latin class, too. Mr. Brunner's crazy tournament days and his faith that I could do well. As exam week got closer, Latin was the only test I studied for. I hadn't forgotten what Mr. Brunner had told me about this subject being life and death for me. I wasn't sure why, but I had started to believe him. The evening before my final, I got so frustrated, I threw the Cambridge Guide to Greek Mythology across my dorm room. Words had started swimming off the page, circling my head, the letters doing 180s as if they were riding skateboards. There was no way I was going to remember the difference between Chiron and Charon, or polydictes and polydeuces. Sorry again, names. Cannot do names. And conjuring those Latin verbs, forget it. I paced the room, feeling like ants were crawling around inside my shirt. I remembered Mr. Brunner's serious expression, his 1,000-year-old eyes. I will accept only the best from you, Percy Jackson. I took a deep breath. I picked up the mythology book. I had never asked a teacher for help before. Maybe if I talked to Mr. Brunner, he could give me some pointers. At least I could apologize for being the big fat F I was about to score on his exam. I didn't want to leave Yancey Academy with him thinking that I hadn't tried. I walked downstairs to the faculty offices. Most of them were dark and empty, but Mr. Brunner's door was ajar. Light from his window stretching across the hallway floor. I was 3 steps from the door's handle when I heard voices inside the office. Mr. Brunner asked a question. A voice that was definitely Grover's said, "Worried about Percy, sir." I froze. I'm not usually an eavesdropper, but I dare you to try not listening if you hear your best friend talking about you to an adult. I inched closer. "Alone this summer," Grover was saying. "I mean, a kindly one in our school. Now that we know for sure, and they know too, we would only make matters worse by rushing him," Mr. Brunner said. "We need the boy to mature more." "But he may not have time. The summer solstice deadline will have to be resolved without him, Grover. Let him enjoy his ignorance while he still can." "Sir, he saw her." "His imagination," Mr. Brunner insisted. "The mist over the students and staff will be enough to convince him of that." "Sir, I can't fail my duties again." Grover's voice was choked with emotion. You know what that would mean." "You haven't failed, Grover," Mr. Brunner said kindly. "I should have seen her for what she was. Now let's just worry about keeping Percy alive until next fall." The mythology book dropped out of my hands and hit the floor with a thud. Mr. Brunner went silent. My heart hammering, I picked up the book and backed down the hall. A shadow slid across the lighted glass of Mr. Brunner's office door. The shadow of something much taller than my wheelchair-bound teacher, holding something that looked suspiciously like an archer's bow. I opened the nearest door and slipped inside. A few seconds later, I heard a slow clop, 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 like muffled wood blocks. Then a sound like an animal snuffling right outside my door. A large, dark shape paused in front of the glass, then moved on. A bead of sweat trickled down my neck. Somewhere in the hallway, Mr. Brunner spoke. "Nothing," he murmured. "My nerves haven't been right since the winter solstice." "Mine neither," Grover said. "But I could have sworn—" "Go back to the dorm," Mr. Brunner told him. "You've got a long day of exams tomorrow." "Don't remind me." The lights went out in Mr. Brunner's office. I waited in the dark for what seemed like forever. Finally, I slipped out into the hallway and made my way back up to the dorm. Grover was lying on his bed, studying his Latin exam notes like he'd been there all night. "Hey," he said, bleary-eyed. "You going to be ready for the test?" I didn't answer. "You look awful," he frowned. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired." I turned so he couldn't read my expression and started getting ready for bed. I didn't understand what I heard downstairs. I wanted to believe I'd imagined the whole thing. But one thing was clear. Grover and Mr. Brunner were talking about me behind my back. They thought I was in some kind of danger. The next afternoon, as I was leaving the 3-hour Latin exam... 3-hour Latin exam. Why did it take so long? Oh gosh. My eyes swimming with all the Greek and Roman names I'd misspelled. Mr. Brunner called me back inside. For a moment, I was worried he'd found out about my eavesdropping the night before, but that didn't seem to be the problem. "Percy," he said, "don't be discouraged about leaving Yancey. It's for the best." His tone was kind, but the words still embarrassed me. Even though he was speaking quietly, the other kids finishing their tests could hear. Nancy Bobofit smirked at me and made sarcastic little kissing motions with her lips. I mumbled, "Okay, sir." Mr. Brunner wheeled his chair back and forth like he wasn't sure what to say. "This isn't the right place for you. It was only a matter of time." My eyes stung. Here was my favorite teacher, in front of the class, telling me I couldn't handle it. After saying he'd believed in me all year, he was telling me I was destined to get kicked out. "Right," I said, trembling. No, Mr. Brunner said. "Oh, confound it all. What I'm trying to say is, you're not normal, Percy. There's nothing to be—" "Thanks," I blurted. "Thanks a lot, sir, for reminding me. Percy." But I was already gone. On the last day of the term, I shoved my clothes into my suitcase. The other guys were joking around, talking about their vacation plans. One of them was going on a hiking trip to Switzerland. Another was cruising the Caribbean for a month. They were juvenile delinquents like me, but they were rich juvenile delinquents. Their daddies were executives or ambassadors or celebrities. I was a nobody from a family of nobodies. They asked me what I'd be doing this summer, and I told them I was going back to the city. What I didn't tell them was that I'd have to get a summer job walking dogs or selling magazine subscriptions, and spend all my free time worrying about where I'd go to school this fall. "Oh," one of the guys said, "that's cool." They went back to their conversation as if I'd never existed. The only person I dreaded saying goodbye to was Grover, but as it turned out, I didn't have to. He booked a ticket to Manhattan on the same Greyhound as I had. So there we were together, heading to the city. During the whole bus ride, Grover kept glancing nervously down the aisle, watching the other passengers. It occurred to me that he'd always acted nervous and fidgety when we left Yancey, as if he expected something bad to happen. Before, I'd always assumed he was worried about getting teased, but there was nobody to tease him on the Greyhound. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I said, "Looking for kindly ones?" Grover nearly jumped out of his seat. What do you mean?" I confessed about eavesdropping on him and Mr. Brunner the night before the exam. Grover's eyes twitched. "How much did you hear?" "Oh, not much. What's the summer solstice deadline?" He winced. "Look, Percy, I was just worried for you. See, hallucinating about demon math teachers, Grover. And I was telling Mr. Brunner that maybe you were overstressed or something, because there was no such person as Mrs. Dodds, and—" "Grover, you're a really bad liar." His ears turned pink. From his shirt pocket, he fished out a grubby business card. "Just take this, okay? In case you need me this summer." The card was in fancy script, which was a murder on my dyslexic eyes, but I finally made out something like, "Grover Underwood, Keeper, Half-Blood Hill, Long Island, New York." "What's half—" "Don't say it out loud," he yelped. "That's my, summer address." My heart sank. Grover had a summer home. I had never considered that his family might be as rich as the others at Yancey. "Okay," I said glumly. "So, if I want to come visit your mansion—" He nodded. Or if you need me." "Why would I need you?" It came out harsher than I meant it to. Grover blushed right down to his Adam's apple. "Look, Percy, the truth is, I kind of have to protect you." I stared at him. All year long, I'd gotten into fights, keeping bullies away from him. I'd lost sleep worrying that he'd get beat up next year without me. And here he was, acting like he was the one who defended me. Grover, I said, what exactly are you protecting me from? There was a huge grinding noise under our feet. Black smoke poured from the dashboard, the whole bus filled with a smell like rotten eggs. The driver cursed and limped the Greyhound over to the side of the highway. After a few minutes clanking around in the engine compartment, the driver announced that we'd all have to get off. Grover and I filed outside with everybody else. We were on a stretch of country road, no place you'd notice if you didn't break down there. On our side of the highway was nothing but maple trees and litter from passing cars. On the other side, across 4 lanes of asphalt, shimmering with afternoon heat, was an old-fashioned fruit stand. The stuff on sale looked really good, heaping boxes of blood-red cherries and apples, walnuts and apricots, jugs of cider in a clawfoot tub full of ice. There were no customers, just 3 old ladies sitting in rocking chairs in the shade of the maple tree, knitting the biggest pair of socks I'd ever seen. I mean, these socks were the size of sweaters, but they were clearly socks. The lady on the right knitted one of them. The lady on the left knitted the other. The lady in the middle held an enormous basket of electric blue yarn. All 3 women looked ancient, with pale faces, wrinkled like fruit leather. Silver hair tied back in white bandanas, bony arms sticking out of bleached cotton dresses. The weirdest thing was, they seemed to be looking right at me. I looked over to Grover to say something about this, and saw that the blood had drained from his face. His nose was twitching. Grover, I said. Hey, man. Tell me, they're not looking at you. They are, aren't they? Yeah, weird, huh? You don't think those socks would fit me. Not funny, Percy. Not funny at all. The old lady in the middle took out a huge pair of scissors, gold and silver, long-bladed like shears. I heard Grover catch his breath. We're getting on the bus, he told me. Come on. What? I said. It's 1,000 degrees in there. Come on. He pried open the door and climbed inside, but I stayed back. Across the road, the ladies were still watching me. The middle one cut the yarn, and I swear I could hear the snip across 4 lanes of traffic. Her 2 friends balled up the electric blue socks, leaving me wondering who they could possibly be for, Sasquatch or Godzilla. At the rear of the bus, the driver wrenched a big chunk of smoking metal out of the engine compartment. The bus shuddered, and the engine roared back to life. The passengers cheered. Darn right, yelled the driver. He slapped the bus with his hat. Everybody back on board. Once we got going, I started feeling feverish, as if I'd caught the flu. Grover didn't look much better. He was shivering, and his teeth were chattering. Grover? Yeah? What are you not telling me? He dabbed his forehead with his shirt sleeve. Percy, what did you see back at the fruit stand? You mean the old ladies? What is it about them, man? They're not like Mrs. Dodds, are they? His expression was hard to read, but I got the feeling that the fruit stand ladies were something much, much worse than Mrs. Dodds. He said, Just tell me what you saw. The middle one took out her scissors, and she cut the yarn. He closed his eyes and made a gesture with his fingers that might have been crossing himself. But it wasn't. It was something else, something older. He said, You saw her snip the cord. Yeah, so? But even as I said it, I knew it was a big deal. This is not happening, Grover mumbled. He started chewing his thumb. I don't want this to be like the last time. What last time? Always 6th grade. They never get past 6th. Grover, I said, because he was really starting to scare me. What are you talking about? let me walk you home from the bus station. Promise me." This seemed like a strange request to me, but I promised he could. "Is this like a superstition or something?" I asked. No answer. "Grover, that snipping of the yarn, does that mean somebody's going to die?" He looked at me mournfully, like he was already picking the kind of flowers I'd like best on my coffin. And that is the end of chapter 2. Okay. So I don't know if you want me to stop there or keep going. I think I'm going to take a little break at least. Maybe I'll read one more chapter before ending the stream. How many chapters are there? Can you please not spam the chat, please? If you keep doing that, I might have to mute you. I'm sorry. So, what are the thoughts from you people who've never read the book? Keep going. Read. Okay. Let me get some water. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. You're in timeout. Okay. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this. I'll keep going just for you guys. Chapter 3. Grover unexpectedly loses his pants. I'm sorry, you just have to read the chapter names with them. They're so iconic to me. Confession time. I ditched Grover as soon as we got to the bus terminal. I know. It was rude. But Grover was freaking me out, looking at me like I was a dead man, muttering, "Why does this always happen?" and "Why does it always have to be 6th grade?" Whenever he got upset, Grover's bladder acted up, so I wasn't surprised when as soon as we got off the bus, he made me promise to wait for him, then made a beeline for the restroom. Instead of waiting, I got my suitcase, slipped outside, and caught the first taxi uptown. East 104th and 1st, I told the driver. A word about my mother before you meet her. Her name is Sally Jackson, and she's the best person in the world, which just proves my theory that the best people have the rottenest luck. Her own parents died in a plane crash when she was 5, and she was raised by an uncle who didn't care much about her. She wanted to be a novelist, so she spent high school working to save enough money for college with a good creative writing program. Then her uncle got cancer, and she had to quit school her senior year to take care of him. After he died, she was left with no money, no family, and no diploma. The only good book she ever got, the only good break she ever got, was meeting my dad. I don't have any memories of him, just this sort of warm glow, maybe the barest trace of his smile. My mom doesn't like to talk about him because it makes her sad. She has no pictures. See, they weren't married. She told me he was rich and important, and their relationship was a secret. Then, one day, he set sail across the Atlantic on some important journey and never came back. Lost at sea, my mom told me. Not dead, lost at sea. She worked odd jobs and took night classes to get her high school diploma and raised me on her own. She never complained or got mad. Not even once. But I knew I wasn't an easy kid. Finally, she married Gabe Ugliano, who was nice at first. And nice the first 30 seconds we knew him, then showed his true colors as a world-class jerk. When I was young, I named him Smelly Gabe. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. That guy reeked like moldy garlic pizza wrapped in gym shorts. Between the two of us, we made my mom's life pretty hard. The way Smelly Gabe treated her, The way he and I got along, well, when I came home, is a good example. I walked into our little apartment, hoping my mom would be home from work. Instead, Smelly Gabe was in the living room, playing poker with his buddies. The television blared ESPN. Chips and beer cans were strewn all over the carpet. Hardly looking up, he set around his cigar. "So, you're home." "Where's my mom?" "Working," he said. "You got any cash?" That was it. "No, welcome back. Good to see you. How has your life been the last 6 months?" Gabe had put on weight. He looked like a tuskless walrus in thrift store clothes. He had about 3 hairs on his head, all combed over his bald scalp, as if that made him handsome or something. He managed the electronics megamart in Queens, but he stayed home most of the time. I don't know why he hadn't been fired long before. He just kept on collecting paychecks, spending the money on cigars that made me nauseous, and on beer, of course. Always beer. Whenever I was home, he expected me to provide his gambling funds. He called that our guy secret, meaning if I told my mom, he'd punch my lights out. "I don't have any cash," I told him. He raised a greasy eyebrow. Gabe could sniff out money like a bloodhound, which was surprising since his own smell should have covered up everything else. "You took a taxi from the bus station," he said. "Probably paid with a 20. Got a $6 or $7 and change." "Somebody expects to live under this roof. He ought to carry his own weight. Am I right, Eddie?" Eddie, the super of the apartment building, looked up with me with a twinge of sympathy. "Come on, Gabe," he said. "The kid just got here." "Am I right?" Gabe repeated. Eddie scowled into his bowl of pretzels. The other 2 guys passed gas in harmony. "Fine," I said. I dug a wad of dollars out of my pocket and threw the money at the table. "I hope you lose." "Your report card came in, brain boy," he shouted after me. "I wouldn't act so snooty." I slammed the door to my room, which wasn't really my room. During the school months, it was Gabe's study. He didn't study anything in there except old car magazines, but he loved showing off my stuff. He loved shoving all my stuff into the closet, leaving his muddy boots on my windowsill, and doing his best to make the place smell like his nasty cologne and cigars and stale beer. I dropped my suitcase on the bed. Home sweet home. Gabe's smell was almost worse than the nightmares about Miss Dodds, or the sound of that old fruit lady's shears snapping the yarn. But as soon as I thought about that, my legs felt weak. I remembered Grover's look of panic, how he made me promise I wouldn't go home without him. A sudden chill rolled through me. I felt like something was looking for me right now, maybe pounding its way up the stairs, growing long, horrible talons. Then I heard my mom's voice. "Percy?" She opened the bedroom door, and my fears melted. My mother can make me feel good just by walking into the room. Her eyes sparkle and change color in the light. Her smile is as warm as a quilt. She's got a few gray streaks mixed in with her long brown hair, but I never think of her as old. When she looks at me, it's like she's seeing all the good things about me, none of the bad. I've never heard her raise her voice or say an unkind word to anyone, not even me or Gabe. "Oh, Percy," she hugged me tight. "I can't believe it. You've grown since Christmas." Her red, white, and blue Sweet on America uniform smelled like the best things in the world. Chocolate, licorice, and all the other stuff she sold at the candy shop in Grand Central. She bought me a huge bag of free samples. She brought me a huge bag of free samples, the way she always did when I came home. We sat together on the edge of the bed. While I attacked the blueberry sour strings, she ran her hand through my hair and demanded to know everything I hadn't put in my letters. She didn't mention anything about me getting expelled. She didn't seem to care about that. But was I okay? Was her little boy doing okay? I told her she was smothering me, and to lay off, and all that, but secretly, I was really, really glad to see her. From the other room, Gabe yelled, "Hey, Sally, how about some bean dip, huh?" I gritted my teeth. My mom is the nicest lady in the world. She would have been married to She should have been married to a millionaire, not some jerk like Gabe. For her sake, I tried to sound upbeat about my last days at Yancey Academy. I told her I wasn't too down about the expulsion. I'd lasted almost a whole year this time. I'd made some new friends. I'd done pretty well in Latin, and honestly, the fights hadn't been as bad as the headmaster said. I liked Yancey Academy. I really did. I put such a good spin on that year. I almost convinced myself. I started choking up thinking about Grover and Mr. Brunner. Even Nancy Bobofitz suddenly didn't seem so bad. Until that trip to the museum. "What?" my mom asked. Her eyes tugged at my conscience, trying to pull out the secrets. "Did something scare you?" "No, Mom. I felt bad lying. I wanted to tell her about Mrs. Dodds and the 3 old ladies with the yarn, but I thought I'd sound stupid." She pursed her lips. She knew I was holding back, but she didn't push me. "I have a surprise for you," she said. "We're going to the beach." My eyes widened. Montauk? Montauk? How do you say that? I'm going to say Montauk. 3 nights, same cabin. When? She smiled. "As soon as I get change." I couldn't believe it. My mom and I hadn't been to Montauk the last 2 summers because Gabe said there wasn't enough money. Sorry, guys. Gabe appeared in the doorway and growled, "Bean dip, Sally? Didn't you hear me?" I wanted to punch him, but I met my mom's eyes and I understood. She was offering me a deal. Be nice to Gabe for a little while, just until she was ready to leave for Montauk. Then we would get out of here. I was on my way, honey," she told Gabe. "We were just talking about the trip." Gabe's eyes got small. "The trip? You mean you were serious about that?" "I knew it," I muttered. "He won't let us go." "Of course he will," my mom said evenly. "Your stepfather is just worried about money, that's all. Besides," she added, "Gabriel won't have to settle for bean dip. I'll make him enough 7-layer dip for the whole weekend. Guacamole, sour cream, the works." Gabe softened a bit. "So, this money for your trip, it comes out of your clothes budget, right?" "Yes, honey," my mother said. "And you won't take my car anywhere but there and back?" "We'll be very careful." Gabe scratched his double chin. "Maybe if you hurry with that 7-layer dip, and maybe if the kid apologizes for interrupting my poker game." "Maybe if I kick you in your soft spot," I thought, "and make you sing soprano for a week." But my mom's eyes warned me not to make him mad. Why did she put up with this guy? I wanted to scream. Why did she care what he thought? "I'm sorry," I muttered. "I'm really sorry I interrupted your incredibly important poker game. Please go back to it right now." Gabe's eyes narrowed. His tiny brain was probably trying to detect sarcasm in my statement. "Yeah, whatever," he decided. He went back to his game. "Thank you, Percy," my mom said. "Once we get to Montauk, we'll talk more about whatever you've forgotten to tell me, okay?" For a moment, I thought I saw anxiety in her eyes, the same fear I'd seen in Grover during his bus ride, as if my mom, too, felt an odd chill in the air. But then her smile returned, and I figured I must have been mistaken. She ruffled my hair and went to make Gabe his 7-layer dip. An hour later, we were ready to leave. Gabe took a break from his poker game, long enough to watch me lug my mom's bags into the car. He kept griping and groaning about losing her cooking, and more important than his '78 Camaro, for the whole weekend. "Not a scratch on this car, brain boy," he warned me, as I loaded the last bag. "Not one little scratch." Like I'd be the one driving. I was 12, but that didn't matter to Gabe. If a seagull so much as pooped on his paint job, he'd find a way to blame me. Watching him lumber back towards the apartment building, I got so mad I did something I can't explain. As Gabe reached the doorway, I made the hand gesture I'd seen Grover make on the bus, a sort of warding off evil gesture. A clawed hand over my heart, then a shoving movement toward Gabe. The screen door slammed shut so hard it whacked him in the butt and sent him flying up the staircase, as if he'd been shot from a cannon. Maybe it was just the wind, or some freak accident with the hinges, but I didn't want to stay long enough to find out. I got in the Camaro and told my mom to step on it. Our rental cabin was on the South Shore, way out at the tip of Long Island. It was a little pastel box with faded curtains half sunken into the dunes. There was always sand in the sheets and spiders in the cabinets, but most of the time the sea was too cold to swim in. I loved that place. We'd been going there since I was a baby. My mom had been going even longer. She never exactly said, but I knew why that beach was so special to her. It was the place where she met my dad. As we got closer to Montauk, she seemed to grow younger, years of worry and work disappearing from her face. Her eyes turned the color of the sea. We got there at sunset, opened all the cabin's windows, and went through our usual cleaning routine. We walked on the beach, fed blue corn chips to the seagulls, and munched on blue jelly beans, blue saltwater taffy, and all the other free samples my mom had brought from work. I guess I should explain the blue food. See, Gabe had once told my mom there was no such thing. They had this fight, which seems like a really small thing at the time, but ever since my mom went out of her way to eat blue instead of eating green in real life. Like, you eat green, like being healthy, but no, Sally Jackson eats blue. Sorry, that's my commentary, that's not the book, but like, she went out of her way to eat blue. She baked blue birthday cakes, she mixed blueberry smoothies, she bought blue corn tortilla chips, and brought home blue candy from the shop. This, along with keeping her maiden name Jackson, rather than calling herself Mrs. Ugliano, was proof that she wasn't totally suckered by Gabe. She did have a rebellious streak, like me. When it got dark, we made a fire. We roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. Mom told me stories about when she was a kid, back before her parents died in the plane crash. She told me about the books she wanted to write someday, when she had enough money to quit the candy shop. Eventually, I got the nerve to ask about what was always on my mind whenever we came to Montauk. My father. My mom's eyes went all misty. I figured she would tell me the same thing she always did, but I never got tired of hearing them. "He was kind, Percy," she said. "Tall, handsome, and powerful, but gentle too. You have his black hair, you know, and his green eyes." Mom fished out a blue jelly bean out of her candy bag. "I wish he could see you, Percy. He'd be so proud." I wondered how she could say that. What was so great about me? A dyslexic, hyperactive boy with a D+ report card, kicked out of school for the 6th time in 6 years. "How old was I asked. When he left." She watched the flames. "He was only with me for 1 summer, Percy. Right here at this beach. This cabin." "But he knew me as a baby." "No, honey, he knew I was expecting a baby. But he never saw you. He had to leave before you were born." I tried I tried to square that with the fact that I seemed to remember something about my father. A warm glow. A smile. I'd always assumed he'd known me as a baby. My mom had never said it outright, but still, I felt it must be true. Now to be told that he'd never seen me, I felt angry at my father. Maybe it was stupid, but I resented him for going on that ocean voyage, for not having the guts to marry my mom. He'd left us, and now we were stuck with smelly Gabe. "Are you going to send me away again?" I asked her. "To another boarding school?" She pulled a marshmallow from the fire. "I don't know, honey." Her voice was heavy. "I think we'll have to do something." "Because you don't want me around?" I regretted the words as soon as they came out. My mom's eyes welled with tears. She took my hand, squeezed it tight. "Oh, Percy, no. I have to, honey. For your own good, I have to send you away." Her words reminded me of what Mr. Brunner had said, that it was best for me to leave Yancey. "Because I'm not normal," I said. "You say that as if it's a bad thing, Percy, but you don't realize how important you are. I thought Yancey Academy would be far enough away. I thought you'd finally be safe." "Safe from what?" She met my eyes. A flood of memories came back to me. All the weird, scary things that had ever happened to me, some of which I tried to forget. During 3rd grade, a man in a black trench coat had stalked me on the playground. When the teachers threatened to call the police, he went away growling, but no one believed me when I told them that under his broad-brimmed hat, the man only had one eye, right in the middle of his head. Before that, a really early memory. I was in preschool, and the teacher accidentally put me down for a nap in a cot that a snake had slithered into. My mom screamed when she come to pick me up and found me playing with a limp, scaly rope I'd somehow managed to strangle to death with my meaty toddler hands. In every single school, something creepy had happened, something unsafe, and I was forced to move. I knew I should tell my mom about the old ladies at the fruit stand and Miss Dodds at the art museum, about my weird hallucination that I had sliced my math teacher into dust with a sword, but I couldn't make myself tell her. I had a strange feeling that the news would end our trip to Montauk. I didn't want that. "I've tried to keep you as close to me as I could," my mom said. "They told me that was a mistake. But there's only one other option, Percy. The place your father wanted to send you, and I just can't stand to do it." "My father wanted me to go to a special school?" "Not a school," she said softly. "A summer camp." My head was spinning. Why would my dad, who hadn't even stayed around long enough to see me born, talk to my mom about a summer camp? And if it was so important, why hadn't she ever mentioned it before? "I'm sorry, Percy," she said, seeing the look in my eyes, "but I can't talk about it. I can't send you to that place. It might mean saying goodbye to you for good." "For good? But it's only a summer camp." She turned towards the fire, and I knew from her expression that if I asked her any more questions, she'd start to cry. That night, I had a vivid dream. It was storming on the beach. 2 beautiful animals, a white horse and a golden eagle, were trying to kill each other at the edge of the surf. The eagle swooped down and slashed the horse's muzzle with its huge talons. The horse reared up and kicked the eagle's wings. As they fought, the ground rumbled, and a monstrous voice chuckled somewhere beneath the earth, goading the animals to fight harder. I ran towards them, knowing I had to stop them from killing each other, but I was running in slow motion. I knew it would be too late. I saw the eagle dive down, its beak aimed at the horse's wide eyes, and I screamed, "No!" I woke with a start. Outside, it really was storming. The kind of storm that cracks trees and blows down houses. There was no horse or eagle on the beach. just lightning making false daylight, and 20-foot waves pounding the dunes like artillery. With the next thunderclap, my mom woke. She sat up, eyes wide, and said, "Hurricane." I knew that was crazy. Long Island never sees hurricanes this early in the summer, but the ocean seemed to have forgotten. Over the roar of the wind, I heard a distant bellow, an angry, tortured sound that made my hair stand on end. Then a much closer noise, like mallets in the sand, a desperate voice, someone yelling, pounding on her cabin door. My mother sprang out of bed in her nightgown and threw open the lock. Grover stood framed in the doorway against a backdrop of pouring rain, but he wasn't. He wasn't exactly Grover. "Searching all night," he gasped. "What were you thinking?" My mother looked at me in terror, not scared of Grover, but why he'd come. "Percy," she said, shouting to be heard over the rain. "What happened at school? What didn't you tell me?" I was frozen, looking at Grover. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Oh gosh. Ozu kai aloi vioi? I don't know. I don't speak Greek, I'm sorry. He yelled. "It's right behind me. Didn't you tell her?" I was too shocked to register that he just cursed in ancient Greek. Oh, I guess I just cursed in ancient Greek on stream then. Very badly pronounced, though. Jeez. And I'd understood him perfectly. I was too shocked to so, I'm gonna just restart that whole paragraph. I was too shocked to register that he just cursed in ancient Greek. And I'd understood him perfectly. I was too shocked to wonder how Grover had gotten here by himself, in the middle of the night, because Grover didn't have his pants on. And where his legs should be, my mom looked at me sternly and talked in a tone she'd never used before. "Percy, tell me now." I stammered something about the old ladies at the fruit stand and Mrs. Dodds. My mom stared at me, her face deathly pale in the flashes of lightning. She grabbed her purse, tossed me my rain jacket, and said, "Get to the car, both of you. Go." Grover left for the Camaro, but he wasn't running exactly. He was trotting, shaking his shaggy hindquarters, and suddenly his story about a muscular disorder in his legs made sense to me. I understood how he could run so fast and still limp when he walked. Because where his feet should be, there were no feet. There were cloven hooves. And we end the 3rd chapter. So, thoughts, questions, feelings? What do you think of Gabe? What do you think of Sally? No, keep going. Opal, I'm glad you're liking this. I might read another chapter. Gabe is trash. What? No, you get to call Gabe trash. You two, don't block that. Okay. So, I take it we are going to read another chapter then. If I get 3 votes of people saying yes, read another chapter, I will continue on to the chapter 4, My Mother Teaches Me Bullfighting. Who wants to read My Mother Teaches Me Bullfighting? So I've got 2 votes for more. Okay, I guess that'll be 3. The cliffhanger. I mean, I feel like the next chapter is almost more of a cliffhanger, but okay. Ooh, we get to meet Annabeth in the next chapter, I think. Just at the very end. I suppose I will read. Chapter 4. My Mother Teaches Me Bullfighting. We tore through the night along dark country roads. Wind slammed up against the Camaro. Rain lashed the windshield. I didn't know how my mom could see anything, but she kept her foot on the gas. Every time there was a flash of lightning, I looked at Grover sitting next to me in the back seat, and wondered if I'd gone insane, or if he was wearing some kind of shag carpet pants. But no, the smell was one I remembered from the kindergarten field trips to the petting zoo. Lanolin, from wool. The smell of wet barnyard animal. All I could think to say was, "So, you and my mom know each other?" Grover's eyes flitted to the rearview mirror. Though there were no cars behind us. "Not exactly," he said. "I mean, we've never met in person. But she knew I was watching you." "Watching me?" "Keeping tabs on you, making sure you were okay. But I wasn't faking being your friend," he added hastily. "I am your friend." What are you exactly?" "That doesn't matter right now." It doesn't matter? From the waist down, my best friend is a donkey." Grover let out a sharp, throaty, blah ha ha. I don't know. Blah. Yeah, blah ha ha. Sounds, guys, sounds. I'd heard him make that sound before, but I'd always assumed it was a nervous laugh. Now I realized it was more of an irritated bleat. "Goat," he cried. "What?" "I'm a goat from the waist down." "You just said it didn't matter." "Blah ha ha, there are satyrs who would trample you under hoof for such an insult." "Whoa, wait, satyrs? You mean like Mr. Brunner's myths?" "Were those old ladies at the fruit stand a myth, Percy? Was Miss Dodds a myth?" "So you admit there was a Miss Dodds?" "Of course. Then why—" "The less you knew, the fewer monsters you would attract," Grover said, like that should be perfectly obvious. "We put mist over the other human's eyes. We hoped you'd think the kindly one was a hallucination. But it was no good. You started to realize who you are." Wait a minute, what do you mean?" The weird bellowing noise rose up again somewhere, behind us, closer than before. Whatever was chasing us was still on our trail. "Percy," my mom said, "there's too much to explain and not enough time. We have to get you to safety." "Safety from what? Who's after me?" "Oh, nobody much," Grover said, obviously still miffed about the donkey comment. "Just the Lord of the Dead and a few of his bloodthirstiest minions." "Grover!" "Sorry, Miss Jackson. Could you drive faster, please?" I tried to wrap my mind around what was happening, but I couldn't do it. I knew this wasn't a dream. I had no imagination. I could never dream of something this weird. My mom made a hard left. We swerved onto a narrower road, racing past darkened farmhouses and wooden hills. And pick your own strawberry signs on the white picket fences. "Where are we going?" I asked. "The summer camp I told you about." My mother's voice was tight. She was trying for my sake not to be scared. "The place your father wanted to send you." "The place you didn't want me to go?" "Please, dear," my mother begged. "This is hard enough. Try to understand. You're in danger." "Because some old ladies cut yarn?" "Those weren't old ladies," Grover said. "Those were the fates. Do you know what it means? The fact that they appeared in front of you? They only do that when someone's about to die." "Whoa, you said you." "No, I didn't. I said someone." "You meant you, as in me." I meant you like someone, not you. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, guys. I'm causing some confusion. This is confusing me. Boys, my mom said. She pulled the wheel hard to the right, and I got a glimpse of a figure she'd swerved to avoid, a dark, fluttering shape now lost behind us in the storm. What was that? I asked. We're almost there, my mother said, ignoring my question. Another mile. Please, please, please. I don't know what there was, but I found myself leaning forward in the car, anticipating wanting us to arrive. Outside, nothing but rain and darkness, the kind of empty countryside you could get way out on the tip of Long Island. Ugh, that was really choppy. Oops. Choppy reading. Where was I? I thought about Miss Dodds in the moment she changed into the thing with pointed teeth and leathery wings. My limbs went numb from delayed shock. She really hadn't been human. She'd meant to kill me. Then I thought about Mr. Brunner and the sword he'd thrown to me. Before I could ask Grover about that, the hair rose on the back of my neck. There was a blinding flash, a jaw-rattling boom, and our car exploded. I remember feeling weightless, like I was being crushed, fried, and hosed down all at the same time. I peeled my forehead off the back of the driver's seat and said, "Ow." "Percy," my mom shouted. "I'm okay." I tried to shake off the daze. I wasn't dead. The car hadn't really exploded. We've swerved into a ditch. Our driver's side doors were wedged in the mud. The roof had cracked open like an eggshell, and the rain was pouring in. Lightning. That was the only explanation. We'd been blasted right off the road. Next to me in the back seat was a big, motionless lump. Grover. He was slumped over, blood trickling from the side of his mouth. I shook his furry hips, thinking, no, even if you are half barnyard animal, you're still my best friend, and I don't want you to die. Then he groaned. Food. And I knew there was hope. Percy, my mother said, we have to... Her voice faltered. I looked back. In a flash of lightning, through the mud-spattered rear windshield, I saw a figure lumbering toward us, on the shoulder of the road. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It was a dark silhouette of a huge guy. Like a football player, he seemed to be holding a blanket over his head. His top half was bulky and fuzzy. His upraised hands made it look like he had horns. I swallowed hard. Who is... Percy, my mother said, deadly serious. Get out of the car. My mother threw herself against the driver's side door. It was jammed shut in the mud. I tried mine. Stuck to. I looked up desperately at the hole in the roof. It might have been an exit, but the edges were sizzling and smoking. Climb out the passenger side, my mother told me. Percy, you have to run. Do you see that big tree? What? Another flash of lightning, and through the smoking hole in the roof I saw the tree that she meant. A huge White House Christmas tree-sized pine at the crest of the nearest hill. That's the property line, my mom said. Get over that hill and you'll see a big farmhouse down in the valley. Run and don't look back. Yell for help. Don't stop until you reach the door. Mom, you're coming too. Her face was pale, her eyes as sad as when she looked at the ocean. No, I shouted, you're coming with me. Help me carry Grover. Food, Grover moaned a little louder. The man with a blanket on his head kept coming towards us, making his grunting, snorting noises. As he got closer, I realized he couldn't be holding a blanket over his head, because his hands were huge, meaty hands. Huge, meaty hands were swinging at his sides. There was no blanket, meaning the bulky, fuzzy mass that was too big to be his head was his head. And the points that looked like horns? He doesn't want us, my mother told me. He wants you. Besides, I can't cross the property line. But We don't have time, Percy. Go, please. I got mad. Then mad at my mother, at Grover, the goat, at the thing with horns that was lumbering towards us slowly and deliberately, like a bull. I climbed across Grover and pushed the door open into the rain. We're going together. Come on, Mom. I told you. Mom, I'm not leaving you. Help me with Grover. I didn't wait for her answer. I scrambled outside, dragging Grover from the car. He was surprisingly light, but I couldn't have carried him very far if my mom hadn't come to my aid. Together we draped Grover's arms over our shoulders and started stumbling uphill through the waist-high grass. Glancing back, I got my first clear look at the monster. He was 7 feet tall, easy, his arms and legs like something from the cover of Muscle Man magazine, bulging biceps and triceps, and a bunch of other seps, all stuffed like baseballs, under vein-webbed skin. Ew. He wore no clothes, except underwear. I mean, bright white Fruit of the Looms, which would have looked funny, except that the top half of his body was so scary. Coarse brown hair started at about his belly button and got thicker as it reached his shoulders. His neck was a mass of muscle and fur leading up to his enormous head, which had a snout as long as my arm, snotty nostrils with a gleaming brass ring, cruel black eyes and horns, enormous black and white horns with points you couldn't get from an electric sharpener. With points you couldn't get from an electric sharpener, sorry. I recognized the monster all right. He'd been in one of the first stories Mr. Brunner told us, but he couldn't be real. I blinked the rain out of my eyes. That's Pasiphae's son, my mother said. I wish I'd known how badly they want to kill you. But he's the Mint. Don't say his name, she warned. Names have power. The pine tree was still too far away. Way too far. 100 yards uphill at least. I glanced behind me again. The bull man hunched over the car, looking at the windows. Or not looking exactly, more like snuffling, nuzzling. I wasn't sure why he bothered, since we were only about 50 feet away. Food? Grover moaned. Shh, I told him. Mom, what's he doing? Doesn't he see us? His sight and hearing are terrible, she said. He goes by smell, but he'll figure out where we are soon enough. As if on cue, the bullman bellowed in rage. He picked up Gabe's Camaro by the torn roof, the chassis creaking and groaning. He raised the car over his head and threw it down the road. It slammed into the wet asphalt and skidded in a shower of sparks for about half a mile before coming to a stop. The gas tank exploded. Not a scratch, I remembered Gabe saying. Oops. Percy, my mom said, when he sees us, he'll charge. Wait until the last second, then jump out of the way. Directly sideways. He can't change directions well once he's charging. Do you understand? How do you know all this? I've been worried about an attack for a long time. I should have expected this. I was selfish, keeping you near me. Keeping me near you, but another bellow of rage, and the bull man started tromping uphill. He'd smelled us. The pine tree was only a few more yards, but the hill was getting steeper and slicker. Grover wasn't getting any lighter. The bull man closed in. Another few seconds, and he'd be on top of us. My mother must have been exhausted, but she shouldered Grover. Go, Percy. Separate. Remember what I said. I didn't want to split up, but I had the feeling that she was right. It was our only chance. I sprinted to the left, turned and saw the creature bearing down on me. His black eyes glowed with hate. He reeked like rotten meat. He lowered his head and charged. Those razor-sharp horns aimed straight at my chest. The fear in my stomach made me want to bolt, but that wouldn't work. I could never outrun this thing, so I held my ground at and at the last moment, I jumped to the side. The bullman stormed past, like a freight train, then bellowed with frustration, and turned, but not towards me this time, toward my mother, who was setting Grover down in the grass. We'd reached the crest of the hill. Down the other side, I could see a valley, just as my mother had said, and the lights of the farmhouse glowing yellow through the rain. But that was half a mile away. We'd never make it. The bullman grunted, pawing the ground. He kept eyeing my mother, who was now retreating slowly downhill, back towards the road, trying to lead the monster away from Grover. "Run, Percy," she told me. "I can't go any further. Run." But I just stood there frozen in fear as the monster charged her. She tried to sidestep as she told me to do, but the monster had learned his lesson. His hand shot out and grabbed her by the neck as she tried to get away. He lifted her as she struggled, kicking and pummeling in the air. "Mom!" She caught my eyes, managed to choke out one last word. "Go." Then, with an angry roar, the monster closed his fists around my mother's neck, and she dissolved before my eyes, melting into light, a shimmering golden form, as if she were a holographic projection. A blinding flash, and she was simply gone. No! Anger replaced my fear. Newfound strength burned in my limbs, the same rush of energy I'd gotten when Miss Dodds grew talons. The bullman bore down on Grover, who lay helpless in the grass. The monster hunched over, snuffling my best friend as if he were about to lift Grover up and make him dissolve too. I couldn't allow that. I stripped off my red rain jacket. "Hey!" I screamed, waving the jacket, running to one side of the monster. "Hey, stupid! Ground beef!" Roar! The monster turned toward me, shaking his meaty fists. I had an idea. A stupid idea, but better than no idea at all. I put my back to the pine tree, waved my red jacket in front of the bullman, thinking I'd jump out of the way at the last moment. But it didn't happen like that. The bullman charged too fast, his arms out to grab me whichever way I tried to dodge. Time slowed down. My legs tensed. I couldn't jump sideways, so I leapt straight up, kicking off from the creature's head, using it as a springboard, turning in midair and landing on his neck. How did I do that? I didn't have time to figure it out. A millisecond later, the monster's head slammed into the tree, and the impact nearly knocked my teeth out. The bullman staggered around, trying to shake me. I locked my arms around the horns to keep from being thrown. Thunder and lightning were still going strong. The rain was in my eyes. The smell of rotten meat burned my nostrils. The monster shook himself around and bucked like a rodeo bull. He should have just backed up into the tree and smashed me flat, but I was starting to realize that this thing had only one gear, forward. Meanwhile, Grover started groaning in the grass. I wanted to yell at him to shut up, but the way I was getting tossed around, if I opened my mouth, I'd bite my own tongue off. "Food," Grover moaned. The bullman wheeled towards him, pawed the ground again, and got ready to charge. I thought about how he had squeezed life out of my mother and made her disappear in a flash of light, and rage filled me like the high-octane fuel. I got both hands around one horn. I pulled backwards with all my might. The monster tensed, gave a surprised grunt, then snap. The bullman screamed and flung me through the air. I landed flat on my back in the grass. My head smacked against a rock. When I sat up, my vision was blurry, but I had a horn in my hands. A ragged bone weapon, the size of a knife. The monster charged. Without thinking, I rolled to one side and came up kneeling. As the monster barreled past, I drove the broken horn straight into his side, right up under his furry rib cage. The bullman roared in agony. He flailed, clawing at his chest, then began to disintegrate. Not like my mother in a flash of golden light, but crumbling sand blown away in chunks by the wind, the same way Miss Dodds burst apart. The monster was gone. The rain had stopped. The storm still rumbled, but only in the distance. I smelled like livestock, and my knees were shaking. My head felt like it was splitting open. I was weak and scared and trembling with grief. I had just seen my mother vanish. I wanted to lie down and cry, but there was Grover, needing my help. I managed to haul him up and stagger down into the valley towards the lights of the farmhouse. I was crying, calling for my mother, but I held on to Grover. I wasn't going to let him go. The last thing I remember is collapsing on a wooden porch, looking up at a ceiling fan circling above me. Moths flying around a yellow light, and the stern faces of a familiar-looking bearded man, and a pretty girl, her blonde hair curled like a princess's. They both looked down at me, and the girl said, "He's the one. He must be." "Silence, Annabeth," the man said. "He's still conscious. Bring him inside." And that is the end of chapter 4. So, any questions, theories, thoughts, the usual after that? We're officially 56 pages into this book. Oh. You're in Vegas? Here's a spoiler. They go to Vegas in this book. That's way later, though. Way later than right now. No questions. Wow. Food. Yes. Are you starting to see why I love this book so much? I love this book. It's so good. When does this stop? Who knows? Whenever I can no longer read, I suppose. It's probably not smart, but let's see. The next chapter is I play Pinnacle with a horse. Oh wait, is the next one I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom? That's like my favorite chapter. What is... I was right. It is I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. I love that chapter. Okay. I think I'm gonna give it a break there because we kind of completed the outside of camp part of the book. It's a whole section. All the next parts are going to be exploring camp and all that good stuff there. If you want, I might continue the reading maybe later tonight at my usual streaming time of 8 o'clock, around there. Or maybe tomorrow. Would you like me to continue reading, or would you not like me to continue reading? Because if you guys don't want, I'm going to just continue to read it on my own. But if you do want, I might continue. I'm not sure. Yep, he has dyslexia and ADHD. And a sucky stepfather. His mother's great, though. Hello, Gracie. Read. See, if I read this chapter, I'm definitely going to want to read the next chapter, because I love that chapter. Can we continue tomorrow? Keep going. Would you guys be okay with continuing maybe... Oh, gosh. What time is it? It is 4:27. Okay. Would around 8 o'clock work for you guys? Because I want you guys who are into the book to be able to hear the next parts because I like the parts more. So maybe about 4 or 5 hours from now, or is that like nighttime, or do you have something going on? Like I've just read over 56 pages, so I might want to rest my voice a little bit. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna take a break. I will be on later tonight. I promise. If I can. If I'm not on later tonight, something must have come up, but as of right now, I plan on 8 o'clock Central Time. That is, I'm in Central Time, so, yeah. Oh, it'll be night for you? Opal, may I ask what time zone you're in, or what time it is for you now? It's 5:29 p.m. for you. So you're only an hour later than me. Yeah, well, I think it's best to give my voice a little break right now. I'll keep this stream. Maybe I'll keep them uploaded for a little bit. Yeah, for me it's 4:30, so maybe I'll start at 7:30 then. So for you guys that would be 8:30, so you can listen to maybe another chapter or two. I don't know. If it's 2:29 for you and I'm planning on continuing at 7 or 8, 5, 6, that would be around 5 or 6 for you. I'm in Central Time, or Chicago time if you want to call it that, because that's the city. Big city that also goes with Central Time. Central Time. The more I read, the less I can pronunciate. Okay, I'll try to go on closer to 7, because usually I'm closer to 9. I'll try. I might do this for Wings of Fire as well, if you guys are interested. But yes, I am going to end this here, guys. Thanks for coming. I'll try to stream again later. Okay, bye.